And I want to reiterate a little bit what I said last week in what I'll call Part A. Yesterday was the 40th anniversary of what is considered in the 20th century the greatest upset, the most impossible win. Another way to say it, the most impossible, way beyond improbable, the most impossible win during the 20th century and maybe ever of team win was the 1980 Winter Olympics in Lake Placid. And it was when the U.S. hockey team, some of them were graduated from college, a number of them still in college, when the U.S. hockey team beat the Soviet Union team, which they were average 10 years older than each of the men on the Soviet team were approximately 10 years older, averaged than those on the U.S. hockey team. They were really paid professionals that they had been together for years. That was their job versus just the opposite for the other. And I talked about this last week, and I've learned a couple of things this week that I want to call attention to. So I want to do part 2 on that. It is my understanding that there was a rally. Our president is holding rallies in various states, and he held one in Las Vegas on Friday. I didn't see it. Herb Brooks, who was the coach, the human mastermind, not the divine mastermind, the human mastermind, he passed away now a number of years ago, and his daughter was there in his place. I was not aware of that. I'm very thankful our president did that. I think that was more than just a nice thing that our president did. It was honoring a moment that I believe is a very phenomenal moment in terms of the ongoing development of the global harvest that the Father is doing. He told Jesus to sit there and he would bring the nations to him. He would put his enemies at his footstools, and he would give him the nations. And we believe that is going to occur in the very, very near future, has in some dimensions already been at work, been going. And I explained to you last week that the number 222, February 22nd, is a very significant date. There are many who believe it points to Daniel 2:22, which talks about the secret hidden things God knows, and he will bring them to light, and he dwells in light. He doesn't dwell in darkness. But the sensing of that passage in Daniel 2:22 is there are many things that are hidden that God is well aware of, and that he is at work and bringing about, accomplishing his purposes, and his will be done. And it's my opinion that the greatest of them beyond the cross, nothing will trump the cross and Christ coming and living those 33 years and paying the price that he did. Nothing will trump that. But God has said to his Son that he would give him the nations. And I believe that it's the last movement of the grand symphony that God is orchestrating, and that is the end-time global harvest. I find it very interesting that I pointed out last week that 222, Bob Jones, the Super Bowl that was won this year was on February the 2nd, 2020, and it was Coach Andy Reid's 222nd win. And those numbers just they call attention. They're significant. And there are 3 prophetic men: Bob Jones, John Paul Jackson, and Paul Cain, who in this past 6, 7, 8 years, all of them were very key, very instrumental, very much a part of the development of the Kansas City International House of Prayer, which is a global prayer movement, not just for Kansas City, to bring about intercessors who would pray in the harvest, be among those, be a catalyst, so to speak. Not the only one by any means, but to be a catalyst for the end-time movement of the global harvest and the purposes of God coming to completion in Israel. And mentioned to you that the 3 of them that died in 3 different years, but interestingly, they were buried on the same date. They were buried on February 22nd. Bob Jones in 2014, John Paul Jackson in 2015, buried on the same date, and Paul Cain in 2019, buried on the same date. when I saw that, I wondered in me, these are just questions, the kind of questions I have, did anybody manipulate those dates? I had a conversation this week with Otis, and Otis pointed out to me, I mentioned, it was the time period between the death of Bob Jones. He died on the 14th and was buried on the 22nd. So there was 8 days after his death. And I just decided, I wonder how many days it was after John Paul Jackson's, and he was buried 4 days after he died. And then I looked up and said, I wonder how many days after Paul Cain died that he was buried, because they all were buried on the same date, February 22nd. And he died 10 days before he was buried. And Otis, I didn't catch it. Otis, we were chatting, and he said, Russ, that you add up the number of days from the day from when they died to when they were buried, it totals 22 days. 8 days for Bob Jones, 4 days for John Paul Jackson, and 10 days for Paul Cain. And really, and so we had fun. I don't know if it was fun for him, counting and recounting, and how do you count, and when do you start, and all that. It turned out to be 22 days. And that was very, very instrumental to me. I don't think that was manipulated. Boy, that is very interesting. So again, I want to say, when did the global harvest begin? The one that it's very clear to us God is orchestrating. It began when Christ rose from the dead, and the promise, it began before the foundation of the world. But in terms of when did it begin? Bob Jones was given the understanding that there would be three 20-year time periods, and the question in my mind always has been, when's the first 20 years? And I believe we've gone through the first and second 20-year time period. And if there's a date that I want to suggest, and in one sense, who cares? And in the other sense, I think May the 7th, 1980, because that's when God gave an assignment to a man who had a very stunning, that I talked about, a very stunning death experience, and went outside of heaven and wanted to argue for a longer life. And he made 2 trips, actually taken twice, and he was explaining that he didn't believe in it. It wasn't his theology. He just didn't agree with what was taking place. He didn't believe in it. But he was experiencing, and he was given a 3-year assignment to start on May the 7th, 1980. And I found it interesting that God has used twice the sports analogy, one in 1985 for the Kansas City Royals, in which God was saying he was encouraging the International House of Prayer that improbable victory by the Kansas City Royals is meant to be a lesson to you, that in the end, you're going to be counted out. The International House of Prayer, the prayer movement for the global harvest is going to be counted out. It's going to be deemed, it just didn't make it. And in the last minute, at 5 minutes before 12, it's going to be realized, no, it did succeed. And so I'm giving you a sign in the natural, God said, through the improbable World Series win of the Kansas City Royals. They did. Bob Jones, I've told that story. Bob Jones also has given to many people the word that when the Kansas City Chiefs win the Super Bowl, then the apostolic, he said many things to different people. The apostolic chiefs would begin to function. The end-time harvest would take place it would begin in great abundance. I've pondered this, the 40-year anniversary, which was yesterday, February 22nd, today being February 23rd. And I again want to say, I believe that it pictured that what was coming would be impossible. Nobody, except maybe the coach, and Jesus is the coach, he believes in it. He believes in the end-time harvest. That maybe nobody but the coach, Herb Brooks, believed in this instance, the U.S. I think it's not so much the U.S. versus Russia. It's Russia is the major focal point. It was the youth of the U.S. that defeated the professional, almost like the Red Army of Russia, the Soviet Union's Red Army. The professionals, they were defeated by a team of much younger, the youth, of which the end-time harvest, we've been told over and over, it'll primarily, not exclusively, be a harvesting group that has youth and teens and young adults that will be the major component, not the exclusive component. And it's like that so pictures that. It pictured before it ever started. I believe that when it started in 1980 in May, that in February 22nd of that year, he pictured what is considered without a doubt the greatest team, most impossible, improbable victory that could ever take place. That the Soviet hockey team that had won the gold medal, I think the last 4 Olympics prior to that they were going to be defeated by a team of youth. Yes, it was from the United States, but I don't believe that the story is the United States against the Soviet Union. I believe it's the youth against the professional, and it focuses on Russia. They were supposed to win. And I believe that Russia, actually, it's because what God's going to do in Russia, and not exclusively, but involving the youth, that's going to impact the whole world. And I see that the coach, the real coach, who knows how, he's the one who, from the Alpha and the Omega, he is the one who is the head of the church, the beginning and the end, that he knows how to do it. And it's like, you painted a picture in 1980, you painted a picture, and we've reached the culmination of the time of testing, so to speak. It's the 40 years of testing has taken place. It was like, what an astounding picture. And someone could say it doesn't mean any of those things. I believe that it points to all of those things. It points to the most improbable victory that nobody would agree with except the coach. Nobody thought they had a chance except the coach. That it would involve the former Soviet Union, and it would not be the professionalism of the former Soviet Union, but it would be youth. And they would take the world. They would take the prize. They would do the improbable. They would have the impossible win. I feel like, God, you so pictured that, and he put it on a date. It's like, you need something else for people like me. You need something else to hang your coat on, your jacket on. Okay, that particular game happened on February 22nd, a very key marker. Now that 40 years have gone by, how much of a key marker that key marker is. Only God can orchestrate like that. It's a magnificent moment. And then for our president to call attention to it in such a fashion, to me, is just an astounding, it's just an astounding moment that I just learned about this morning about what took place in that crusade.
37. Bill Baker. Bill, come up. Bill Baker.
He was one of the big stars.
Dave Christian. Ken Morrow. Jack O'Callahan. Mike Ramsey.
2 key figures.
Those legs took a beating. Mark Wells. Neil Broughton. John Harrington. Rob McClanahan.
Oh, a big one.
Buzz Schneider. Dave Silk. Phil Vercotta. And a great coach, an assistant coach at the time, Craig Patrick.
That what is going to be done is going to be considered as impossible as that win was. And the timing of it, I just want to say, Father, just for the intricacies of the way you do things. Just the intricacy, the beauty, the magnificence of how you do things. Thank you, Jesus.